Elin, Sila, Lumen, Omen Tielvo. Today I wanted to take a look at how a Silmarillion TV show could look, the amount of seasons, episodes, and runtimes it could have. Now I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who's currently a film student and has been thinking about how to make this show going on 3 years now. So let's first look at the seasons. I've gone back and forth on how many seasons there would be. My first thought was initially there would be 7 seasons, but as I kept thinking about it, there could be as many as 8, and let me explain why. Season 0 is what I'm going to be calling this first season, and this season would consist of the Ainulindale through to the migration of the elves to Valinor, and I see this being about 6 episodes long. The main problem I see with this being an entire season is that the main characters would be the Valar. They would be almost entirely the only characters you'd get to see. But after this season, the Valar would become secondary and even tertiary characters, and sometimes the Valar would never even show up in a season, or could never show up in a season. In terms of a TV show structure that is focused on a core group of characters, this seems like a really good way to shoot yourself in the foot from the get-go. I do not doubt that a talented writer and an amazing director would be able to pull off a season like this, but it would be a huge risk that might not be worth trying, as a Silmarillion TV show would undoubtedly be one of, if not the most expensive TV show in TV history. In the first season, or what I consider the first season, would in the first episode have a prologue that shows in a montage all the important events of what Season 0 would contain. It would then jump straight into the creation of the Silmarils by Feanor and the release of Melkor, and that would be the plot for the entire 7 to 8 episodes that the season would be. The halfway point, so episode 4-ish, would be the destruction of the two trees and the death of Finwë and the taking of the Silmarils. And then the next episodes would deal with the Oath of Feanor and the Kinslaying, and the season would end with Feanor burning the ships. But that's just the A plot. There would be a B plot as well, and that would deal with the Sindar. In that plot, Thingol would be meeting with the dwarves and building Menelgroth and preparing for the coming darkness that Melian would sense coming. The 5th episode would all be about the first battle of Beleriand and how Thingol and Melian created Doriath. The second season would pick up right after the burning of the ships with a 2-parter opener, showing the dagger Nuin Gileath, Feanor's death, and Maithros' capture, with the march of Fingolfin across the Hill Caraxes. And the final scene of that 2-parter would be men awakening under the sun. Episode 3 would detail the rescuing of Maithros and the burying of the hatchet between the Noldor, at least for now. The rest of the season would then focus on building the new kingdoms and the alliances between the Noldor and Sindar, and that would lead to Thingol learning of the Kinslaying. Finrod and Torgon would begin building Nargothrond and Gondolin in this season as well. The final episode would be the Dagor Aglareb and the beginnings of the Siege of Angband. The third season would be anywhere between 8 to 10 episodes, and to me this would be the season that would honestly make or break the show. The season would take us from the Dagor Aglareb all the way to the Dagor Bragollach. That's a span of almost 400 years in which events are sparsely populated. There would be the completion of Nargothrond and Gondolin, the misadventure of Arathel and the birth of Maeglin and his coming to Gondolin, the reveal of Glaurung to the elves, the coming of men to Beleriand and their settlement, and the elves seeing death from old age. And then the Bragollach happens and the duel of Fingolfin and Morgoth. For these events to play out consecutively and still make sense story-wise and plot-wise would take a very creative person behind the season. But I don't think that there is enough content to make it 2 whole separate seasons. Season 4 is the big one. This is the one where the tale of Beren and Luthien would be told, arguably Tolkien's most important story, at least in regards to the professor personally. Because of the importance of Beren and Luthien, their storyline would make up the majority of the episodes and be the main focus. If the season is 10 episodes, Beren and Luthien would take up about 8 of those, but within those 8 episodes would be the B-plots, which would lead the rest of the season into the finale, which would be the Nirnaeth Arnoidiad. In order to set that up properly, you need to meet Hurin and Huor and witness parts of their story. The 5th season would be the longest season, with anywhere from 12 to 14 episodes, depending on how much focus there were on individual moments. The 2 plotlines from this season would be the life of Turin Turambar and Tuor arriving in Gondolin and giving Ulmo's warning to Torgon. But the main focus would be on Turin, as there would be early on entire episodes in which Tuor would not appear. Season 6 would have 8 episodes and would begin with Hurin and his misadventures after being released from Angband. The next 2 episodes would have the first sack of Doriath and the death of Thingol. The next episode would be about Dior rebuilding before the second sack, occurring in the very next episode. The last section of the season would then show the fall of Gondolin. And then the 7th and final season of the Silmarillion show would show the aftermath of the fall of Gondolin, the first voyage of Eärendil, the 3rd Kinslaying, the arrival of Eärendil to Valinor, and have the 2-part finale of the War of Wrath. So that's just the basic plot structure that I believe a show adapting the Silmarillion should generally look like. Now, just like every adaptation, there's going to be some time compression, or what would seem like time compression. I say seem like time compression because your main characters are mostly going to be elves. And what I mean by that is, for most of the show, the main point of view characters are elves. Immortal elves who, by extension, experience time very differently than mortals. There's the famous line Thranduil tells Thorin in the Desolation of Smaug, 100 years is a blink of an eye to an elf. I think using this line as kind of the writer's mindset gives the writer the ability to more easily compress the time in between events while still having a very logical reasoning behind it. Of course, the show should attempt to make it as accurate as possible to what the Silmarillion has written. And I want to make it clear that I am talking about the Silmarillion as an adapted work, not a First Age show. And I do believe that there is a big difference there. And the difference comes from the various accounts and story beats Tolkien created and that Christopher published in the history of Middle-earth. The biggest one of those being the parentage of Gil-galad. In the Silmarillion, it's Fingon, and in other writings that, according to Christopher, should have been used, stated that Orodreth is the father. So if a Silmarillion show comes under development, I believe the showrunners need to inform fans exactly what it is they are adapting and what that means, and what rights they have in general. Now, there are so many other little things that I could discuss here in this video, as I've thought about it for some time now on how to do with this Silmarillion show. But I just wanted to give a basic overview of how I believe, as a film student, a Silmarillion adaptation should or could be done. Who knows, maybe someday, by some insane miracle, I'll be able to make this very adaptation for you all. That would be quite something. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say, so thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, feel free to like and subscribe for more content. Please let me know how I can better improve these videos. Thanks, and as the elves say, Namarie.